If you manage Google Ads accounts for a living, you might find yourself in a conversation every once in a while with a business owner who asks you, "So, how much should I spend on Google?" And perhaps you don't know exactly how to answer that question. Well, today I'm going to show you how you can answer that question using a calculator that will give you a budget forecast and projections for some of the key metrics that you might use in Google Ads. And this is going to be a great starting point for not only delivering very quickly in about 5 to 10 minutes a budget recommendation to a client, but also having those benchmarks that you can use when you launch your campaigns and you know exactly what targets you should be aiming for in terms of your ideal cost per conversion and other metrics. So first, you can find the spreadsheet in the description below. So open the spreadsheet and make a copy, and this is what you'll be able to find. And this is what the spreadsheet looks like. Keep in mind that this calculator is specifically for lead generation. I had seen several e-commerce spreadsheets like these that give you these projections, but I hadn't seen too many for lead generation. So I decided to create this one to help all of us that are managing a lot of lead generation clients. So all you really have to do is enter in these yellow cells, enter campaign figures, a couple of campaign figures, campaign metrics, and a couple of values from the leads funnel if you have them or if you have access to them. And you'll be able to get projections for budget recommendations, number of clicks, estimated number of leads, estimated number of closed deals, estimated revenue, cost per lead estimate, ROI, ROAS, etc. So I'll run through all those numbers in a second, but basically it is that simple. Just plug in some numbers here and you'll see how the spreadsheet will automatically fill out based on formulas for all these figures. Now, there is a low, medium, and a high auto recommendation. I'll talk about that in a second, but just remember that the low is assuming a budget for a 25% search impression share. The medium is assuming a budget for a 50% search impression share, and the high is for 75% impression share. The calculator is also just specifically for one campaign. So if you want to do this for multiple campaigns, duplicate or create another tab, duplicate the sheet, and run this for another campaign. But this is going to be for one single non-brand search campaign. So I'll be running through an example, plugging in numbers in here, and you'll get an idea of how this works. But first of all, let me go through what each of these campaign figures means. There's also a little note next to each one that will explain so you get a reminder of how to find this information. So the first is just going to be your management fee. This is going to be how much you charge if you are an agency or a freelancer, what percentage you're charging based on the ad spend. Now, I'll plug in this number in later, because the percentage that we charge as an agency will depend on the percentage or the actual budget recommendation, or what the budget that the client actually selects, right? So I'll plug in this number later, and also keep in mind the number I'll be using is not the number that we actually charge as an agency. It's just an example that I'll be plugging in. The average number of monthly searches, that comes from the Google Keyword Planner, which I'll be opening up in a second. We have to find out how many average monthly searches are happening in the particular area that we're targeting. So that's the one key piece of information that we need to obtain from the client. Or if you're the business owner, you should know what are your service areas, right? What areas do you want to target, whether it's just a small radius or an entire city or an entire region, entire state, or is it the entire country, right? But for lead generation, typically you'll be targeting cities, smaller areas, and we're going to do that in the Keyword Planner. The CPC is the average cost per click of the keywords that we'll be using for this non-brand campaign. So what is the average CPC of those keywords in that location? The CTR and the click-through rate. Now, these are trickier to get because we don't have any way of estimating what a click-through rate will be or what our conversion rate would be. What you can do here is you can actually research industry benchmarks, right? So you can just go on Google, type in WordStream, Local IQ, Search Engine Journal, Google Ads, industry benchmarks, and you'll be able to find a lot of information. You can also use ChatGPT or Gemini or any other AI tool to also come up with some estimates, and just plug in whatever number makes the most sense. The ideal number is actually going to be one that comes from experience, because maybe you've already managed several types of industries and you know what the average conversion rate is for that industry, so you can plug in those kinds of numbers, right? But in this example, I'll probably just be using one of the benchmark examples here from a company called Local IQ that produced this spreadsheet that gives us these click-through rate, cost per click, conversion rate estimates. But again, the cost per click, we're going to use a much more accurate number, which is going to be coming from the Keyword Planner. And the cost per lead is actually going to be an output from the spreadsheet. So I'll run through a real world example. I'm going to be pretending I'm doing this for a personal injury lawyer. I've selected a city. I've selected New Orleans, Louisiana as the city. And all you have to do is go into the Google Ads keyword planner. I've already plugged in keywords that I would use for a personal injury lawyer campaign in New Orleans, and I've selected the DMA region. So you can refine this because that actually feels a little bit big. Let me actually change that to just New Orleans, the city, because that feels like a very large area. So I'll reduce that a little bit to just the city level target. And you just click on get results. And now the first thing that you have to do is first you get this estimated number of monthly searches, which is 19,820. One thing we have to do is click on refine keywords here. And first of all, we have to remove any competitors. So all these additional lawyers that might be showing up, other brands, we want to remove that. And we may want to consider removing keywords that we may want to use in a different campaign. So for example, truck attorney or car attorney, bike, motorcycle, bus, all these I'll take off for now because I would actually use this in a different search campaign. This would be a campaign only for general searches of injury lawyer, personal injury lawyer near me, etc. So you see that reduced the average monthly searches to about 10,000 now. And let me see if there's anything else I want to remove. So I'll leave it like that for now, but you get the idea. I'll take these Morgan Law off as well. So that's around 10,870. So that's where we get the number. You may also want to use the search volume trends figure here, the chart here, if you're in a very seasonal business. So if you're like doing this for a pest control company, what you may want to do is if you're doing this projection for the month of, say, October, if it's September and you want to do it for October, look at October of last year and maybe you get the number from there. Maybe the 8,000 would make more sense. But in the case of this, personal injury is not very seasonal, right? People get injured when they get injured. So I'm just going to use the yearly average, which is 10,870. And that's the number that I'm going to plug in to the average monthly searches value here. Next is the CPC. Now, this might take me a few minutes because what we have to do here, and I chose this industry because I knew it would be fun with the cost per clicks, very, very high CPCs for personal injury lawyers. So what you have to do here is just get an estimated number of keywords or get all these different CPCs and add them up and divide by the number of values that you added. So you take the 100 and you add the 315, and you take 100 and you add 315, and you do that a bunch of times. It's kind of weird that all of these have the exact same values here, but the idea is you just do that, maybe do that with 10 keywords or so, add all those numbers up, divided by the numbers that you added, and you'll end up with the average number of searches. So I'll take a minute here to just do, because these are all just 100 and 315, I'll just add 100 plus 315 and divide that by 2. And that gives me 207.5. So for the sake of this example, I'm just going to use 207.5. I would recommend, taking some time to come up with some estimates there, to use a lot of different keywords, add them up, and come up with a better projection. But yeah, 207.5, I'll just plug in that number for now. Now for the CTR, I'm going to plug in the number from the benchmark here, which is 5.30 for attorneys and legal services, 5.3. And then for the conversion rate, I'm going to plug in the benchmark, which is 5.64. And now we have the projections here for budget recommendation, a low, a medium, and a high, a estimated number of clicks based on the CPC, an estimated number of leads, and an estimated cost per lead, which you can see is actually extremely high. It's almost $3,000 cost per lead. Now, what you might want to do to improve the projected cost per lead, and say it's not going to be $3,000 because maybe a client doesn't want to pay or doesn't want to run Google Ads campaigns, if they're going to be paying almost $4,000 per lead, you may want to play around with a conversion rate and say, maybe we can maybe we can do better than 5.64. Maybe we can do more like 10%, or maybe we can do more like 15%, and that changes the cost per lead quite a bit, right? So the CTR I can leave at that point, and let's say the low is 30,000. So I'm just going to plug in the number of 10% for the sake of argument. It doesn't mean that that's what we charge as an agency. Again, you would need to contact us to find that number, but I'm just going to plug in 10% to make it easier. And you can basically see the low, medium, and high. Again, the low, assuming a conversion rate, assuming a search impression share of 25%, the medium about 50%, meaning we show up 50% of the time. The high is we're showing up 75% of the time. Keep in mind that with automated bidding strategies these days, it's actually very hard to get a 75% search impression share. So whenever we propose these low, medium, and high as an agency, we usually, the number we really want the client to go for is the medium. Presenting the low and the high range kind of gives the client sort of the medium feels like a sweet spot. and that's kind of the higher end number. It's lower. It's kind of the number that we're going for, right? And then on the right here, where you have the manual adjustment settings, basically what I like to do is just round it out, right? Because I don't want to present 29,885 as hey, that's going to be our budget. I want to say let's just round it out to 30,000 on the low, 60,000 on the medium, and 90,000 on the high. And with a 10% budget recommendation, we get the 33K, 66K, 99K management fees, right? And then the clicks, leads, projection is down here as well, with the cost per lead estimate down here too. So I am going to keep it at 15% for now, just to make it feel a little bit better. But again, these are very, very high CPC accounts, and it's not that strange to have like a $1,300 cost per lead for a business that you're paying $200 a click, right? And 15% of the leads are converting. That's pretty good. But it's very, very expensive. So the values down here now on the leads funnel section, we have to get some business information here. So what is the number of leads, first of all, that is answering, right? The answer rate is basically what we want to do here is eliminate everything that could be spam. So what's the percentage of leads that are answering the phone when contacted, or the leads that are just not spam, that are answering, right? So maybe this number is pretty high, because with personal injury, we also get a lot of leads that might be calling the business themselves too. So the contact rate is going to be fairly high. I'm just going to plug in 90% there. Let's say the qualified rate is something like 50%. Like out of everybody that answered, maybe half of the leads qualify, right? So that's going to be 50%. And how many of those close? Meaning, how many of those are going to turn into cases that the law firm is going to take on, right? So maybe it's 25% of those. So at that point, from $30,000, you end up with maybe 2 closed deals. But what is the average customer value of a closed deal? Maybe the value is $50,000 for one closed deal, and that gives you, from 30,000, that gives you a $121,000 estimated revenue, right? So even though the cost per lead is really high, you're still getting a 4 ROAS and a 3.7 ROI, assuming, of course, that you're getting a $50,000 average customer value. Maybe it's more like $25,000, and that gives you more of a 2-to-1 return on ad spend and a 1.81 return on investment. The leads to deals rate would be how many of these form submissions and phone calls, conversions on the website leads turned into closed deals, right? So it's about 11% of those. So that's kind of how the calculator works. Like I said, you can basically use this for any lead generation industry. You can adapt this in many different ways as well. You can also consider for industries that might have a lifetime value, you might want to include or incorporate the lifetime value into the average customer value here. And you can get that by basically understanding how many customers come back on average, maybe over the course of 1 year. I work a lot with med spas, so a service that has a good LTV would be something like Botox, right? So people do come back, they get one injection, they come back 3 months later for another injection. For pest control, they might purchase a recurring service, so they have pest control come in once a month, for example. So that average lifetime value could be higher. For an attorney, is usually going to be a one and done, right? So that's kind of how this whole thing works. And you can see that on the low end, you're getting 60K, on the medium, you're getting 121, and the high end, you're getting 182, assuming these numbers stay true, but sometimes these are referred to as the magic numbers. The conversion rate being included among them, with the answer rate, the qualified lead rate, and the close rate. If you can improve any of these levers, right? If we can take this conversion rate from 15 to 20%, our revenue goes up, our ROAS goes up. But if we can't achieve that, it's more like 10%, then we're barely breaking even, right? If you can improve the contact rate by just 5%, you're getting a lot more revenue. If you can improve the close deal rate from like 25% to 35%, you can get a lot more revenue as well. So you can move these numbers around. You can have a conversation. I oftentimes I pull this up in a meeting with a potential client, and I'll move around. I'll mess with these numbers quite a bit during the call to just demonstrate to them how they can also improve their results in Google Ads by improving some of these stages in the funnel in their business. So if they can improve the qualified lead rate, if they can improve the close rate, they stand to make a lot more revenue. Also, want to take a quick pause to clarify that on the manual adjustments here, let's say the client tells you, you know what, I can't do 30,000. That's too much. The most I can do is 10,000. That doesn't mean you can't do 10,000, right? You're obviously going to get less of a search impression share. You're going to be more limited by budget, but you can actually plug in whatever number you want here. You can just type in $10,000 and you still get those projections and you see the estimated revenue and the numbers don't really change. You can plug in whatever number you want on either of these cells and you'll get whatever the number the client is capable of spending, and you can still provide them with those projections. The great thing about having these projections as well is that they really give you some targets for month 1, month 2, month 3. And of course, having targets gives you focus for when you launch your campaigns. You know exactly what you should be aiming for. So if you projected, let's say, a 10% conversion rate and you're underachieving that, then it's your mission or it's going to be your job to try to get to that 10%. And if you can't get to that 10%, you're going to have to explain why you can't achieve that 10%, right? It's going to be on you to kind of explain. So you have to be careful with what you're projecting on this spreadsheet as well. You can't just plug in a very high conversion rate and then you can't achieve that. So that's just going to make you look bad, right? You have to be realistic and what you think is achievable. So you have to sometimes stick close to the benchmarks, or like I said, try to find out through more additional research what is the conversion rate that you might get in a certain area for a certain industry. And again, AI can help you get those numbers as well. So feel free to make a copy of the spreadsheet, start using it, use the keyword planner, plug in numbers, and let me know if you have any questions. Leave a comment below. And thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all the things that people do on YouTube, and let me know what kinds of videos you'd like me to keep making on this channel. Hope you stay tuned because I'll be back for more. So thanks so much for watching. Until next time.